Right, we'll get started then. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Danica. I'm from Cheer, Stunt, and we've just basically decided to organise this today. So thank you all for coming to support such an important cause. Basically, the aim of today is to give some of our students at UEA the opportunity to share their experiences that they've had during their time in sport, and how we can then learn from these experiences to make change in our own behaviours and make change in our clubs and in UEA in general, to make it a more inclusive and supportive environment for all of our students. So we're going to start with like our panel of student speakers, and then we're going to open up the call to comments or any questions that people have. So if you do want to comment or at the end of the speakers, or you do have a question, would you be able to just message? I think you can do it in, is there a private chat, Grace?
Yeah, it should be. So you can select who you message.
Okay, if you send that message to me, then I'll let you know when you can speak at the end, just so we have a bit more structure. But please, can everyone just make sure that all of your comments or questions are respectful and constructive, and then hopefully it will be a really valuable learning experience for all of us here. So we'll just get on with it. So we'll kicking off our speakers is Mon. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mon. I'm in my third year. I did politics, international relations, and I am a UEA. Well, I was a UEA cheerleader stunt. So I'm just gonna touch on three sports. Briefly on netball, skiing, and cheerleading. So to like give you some backstory to like my ski history, my whole family ski. Both my parents ski. My dad is a black man. He's been skiing since he was a teenager. I've been skiing since I was 4. I was in ski school from 4 till 12 and competed from ages around like 9 till 12. Ski school is basically built up of classes of beginners, advanced and intermediate skiers. You're given an instructor that takes you around the mountains and helps you improve your skiing, as well as puts you with other skiers at your level. Because I started skiing at such an early age and was fortunate enough to be able to ski at least like twice a year, I advanced quickly and through the levels and was able to compete at an intermediate level against other people my age. And no matter like where we went skiing in Europe, be it like France, Switzerland, or Italy, we're always met with the same dirty looks, stares, and comments, and like they think we can't hear them. And then like from the ages of like 4 to 11, I always thought they were just staring at us because we looked cool. Like my parents always said like just ignore it. Like people are just jealous of our ski suits and like our curly hair. Like we just had really cool retro all-in-one ski suits, like funky, colourful bubble hats. So I was like, yeah, oh my god, we're really cool. Like that's why people are staring at us. When I was 8, I remember we were skiing in a bit of like a snowstorm, and it was quite hectic on the slopes. The majority of people wanted to get out of the fog, but my dad wanted to ski like longer. But my mum and like my other siblings, we were so tired, we just went back to the hotel. And like one thing you should never do when you ski is ski alone, because like accidents and whatever. And like we learned as a person of colour, you should really not ski alone. So we waited and waited for my dad to come back, and the day turned like into night, and we were just like worried, like where is he? And then finally my dad came back and he told us he had accidentally bumped into a lady on the slopes, and she got up and she was fine, but there was like a language barrier, and she'd called the mountain rangers on my dad, and they came and like escorted him to a police station, and basically like he had a court date, and we're not from France, like we were skiing in France, so like, but he had a court date in France, so had to do that. Thankfully there were some white English people there, and they saw what happened and tried to help my dad, and obviously they went with him to the police station, and like they would have kept him overnight because like there were other English people there that saw what had happened. He only spent a couple of hours there. And like looking back at it personally, I feel like if my dad was white, this probably wouldn't have happened to him, because like on the mountain it's inevitable you're gonna bump into someone, especially in the fog. Like not once have I witnessed someone getting police called on them for it. Another instance was when I was 11. We'd stopped at a cafe high in the mountains, and like the higher you go in the mountains, the more expensive and bougie it is. So we were surrounded by like a lot of like wealthy white people, and my dad's friend, who's also black but he spoke French, he heard these French people talking behind us, and they said these N-words go everywhere, don't they, which is not nice. I remember my dad wouldn't tell me what they said at the time. He just like sort of laughed it off. When we got home in England, my dad sat me down and explained to me what like slavery was and racism. Like I didn't know, I was in like a little bubble. And he explained, and then like the incidents that had happened whilst we were skiing, and like the two I touched on were just some of the stories. But like once the talk was over, it made sense to me like why the ski school would always insist that we put into a lower level, be put with a lower level instructor, because they assumed because of my complexion I would be no good, sorry, when in fact I was better than most of the kids my age in the mountain and would go on to win like a lot of the races. So I'm not sure how much time I've used up yet, or like how much time I've got left, but I also was in a netball team like outside of school when I was like 13 to 16, but I never had any like racial experiences. I already had like positive experience with netball. I assume it was because I was in quite a multicultural team and our coach was a black woman. However, playing sport at uni was quite different, and the racism was more covert, and many times the people making the remarks and gestures may have had like no idea they were being racist at all. Being a person of colour and being like a cheerleader competing at uni, you would have like quite a different experience to that of a white peer. As the sport is predominantly white, and some of the competing standards cater towards being white. For instance, in second year, when I would compete and go to competitions, we were told all the girls in the team would have to have a certain makeup style and straightened, sticked back hair. And if we had flyaways, there was hairspray on hand to stick them down. Sorry, I just lost where I was reading from. So now, as a person with naturally curly afro hair, this was a bit of a task for me. I had to do heat damage to my hair, adhere to like these essentially Eurocentric beauty standards to be able to compete. And for me, when I do warm-ups and get a little bit sweaty, my hair is going to puff back up to its naturally curly state, and flyaway is always going to curb. And I can't really put hairspray on my hair, as it'll just make the situation worse, as any liquid going on my hair is going to make it go curly again. So I only realised once I got back from the competitions, and I thought, I brought it up to my friends, that it was like sort of really out of order that I had to do that for the sake of looking unified for the rest of the team. And like other little microaggressions I've experienced have been at like sports socials. And there was one time in first year, a boy asked me where I was from, and like what a lot of people of colour understand, like when someone asks you where you're from, like they don't mean like what city are you from in England or whatever, like they mean where are you from, like what is your ethnicity. And like playing dumb, I was just like, I'm from London. And he was like, no, like where are you from, like are you Latino, are you mixed, like what are you? And I'm like, yeah, I'm mixed race. I was like, just told him like my mix, like I'm Russian, English, Nigerian, Jamaican. And he goes, oh wow, Nigerian, so you must have really good genes, like you must be really fast and athletic. Why are you doing cheer, like why aren't you doing something, like why aren't you sprinting? So this was a social in my first year, and I barely knew anyone around me, so I couldn't exactly kick off, as like I myself didn't even know what to say to that. I just nodded politely and waited for the conversation to be over. At socials in my second and third year, however, I would I would like bring it up to them at a social, if social, and they sort of like played it off like, oh yeah, no sorry, they said like, oh yeah, you're a white girl. I'm like, what does that mean? And then one time someone said to me, you're a white girl with a black bum, like what does that mean, like why should my skin color have to be the topic of conversation when we could be talking about like something more interesting? And a lot of the time I would just ignore it, and times when I would call people up on it, I would be like sort of gaslighted and told it was a joke, or it didn't happen like I thought it did. And I feel like over the years racism hasn't really improved, it's just become more covert. It's still very present and embedded in British sport, which is a shame. My dad always just says to me, like, if you keep fighting, you'll just go insane. And for him, that's true, as he's been fighting his whole life. But I feel for me, like, as a daughter of a black man and as being like a person of colour myself, it's sort of my duty to fight against racism and to help educate and see change. As my dad has always said, I'm better than these people with their like closed-minded thoughts, which is true. And more than what like a person assumes about me, racism is just skin deep at the end of the day. Like it's very shallow, and I'm more than just my skin color. So yeah, that's all I have to say. And I think I'm passing on to Muriel next.
Yeah. Hi guys, my name is Muriel, and you guys hope you guys can hear me. I'm Muriel, and I'm first year and I study geography and international development. So I'm currently the ACS sports rep. So if you don't know, ACS stands for African Caribbean Society, and I'm a sports rep. So basically that means that I organise any sporting events that ACS is involved with, and making sure that any societies that want to be involved with ACS can communicate with us and make sure the events run smoothly. So if you look at me, you probably wouldn't think, or you probably wouldn't be able to guess what sport I participate in. I'm currently part of UEA ACS, which is University of East Anglia boat club. So I'm part of the rowing team. And when I tell people I'm part of rowing, they look at me, and the first thing they say, every single time they say this to me, is why rowing? When I used to run, because I used to participate in athletics, and when I used to play netball, I never ever got asked why netball, why athletics. It was always why rowing. When I participated in athletics, it was always what event did you participate in, or netball, what position did you play. But when it's rowing, the first thing is why rowing, because typically you wouldn't expect a black person to row, mainly because there's not a lot of like athletes that actually row. When I look it up, there's not a lot that I see firsthand. And the first thing that everyone says to me is, aren't black people scared of water? I get told that every single time people ask me about rowing, and I'm thinking, like, what kind of microaggression is that? Like, the first thing you should ask me is, oh, rowing, that's nice. What made you choose rowing? Or why rowing, or something like that. The first thing is, black people can't swim, so why would you want to row? And sly comments and sly stuff like that, that put people off and won't encourage people to actually try water sports, because the first thing you do is get judged about water, which is something that's really narrow-minded and really basically just borderline stupid. So it's literally like just microaggressions like that and sly comments that just undermine my ability and make me think maybe I'm not good enough, because why is the first thing that you think about is black people are scared of water, or you're scared your hair's gonna get wet, and just silly stuff like that. So I wasn't too apprehensive when I first joined rowing, because I was like, you know, something new, something different. But I showed up late to the first training session because we don't train on campus. And I walked in late, and I walk in and there's a room of 30 to 40 just white girls. It's just me. And I was so like shocked, because the club is there's about 70, 80 people. And I was the only black, not even just the only black person there, I was the only woman of color there. So I was just a bit taken aback, if that makes sense, because I'm the only black person in there. I've got my wig, I've got my headscarf on and everything. And I'm just like taken aback. And I was shocked because it's a huge club of 70 to 80 people. And so when I went home, I just went through the rowing's Instagram page, and I realized that there was not, I scrolled down to like the last post. I didn't see any black female on that page from how many years. And I might, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I might be the first actual black female to be part of rowing ever. And I was just shocked, because I was thinking, a club full of 70 to 80 people, and there's not one form of representation for me. Luckily for me, I don't mind like joining new clubs, because I'm not really scared of that. But someone else who's not really, you know, comfortable, and they don't see anyone like them, it's really going to put them off, because you don't see any representation in your club. And I think that's really important to work on that, because you're not really going to want to join something if you don't see someone like you. And rightfully so, you would be scared. And for the first couple of months, I felt really uncomfortable and really uneasy, because I didn't want to come across as aggressive or, you know, outspoken if I ever had a problem. I know like I have a very, you know, distinctive voice, so I didn't want to like say I felt uncomfortable, I felt a type of way, and people be like, oh, you're being a bit extra, or you're being a bit dramatic, or it's not that deep, because I don't want people to undermine my experience or think I'm coming across too much. And it's because I've always been treated like that. Like if I ever felt a type of way and I said, oh, I'm not happy with this, or I don't like this, you're being too dramatic, or you want special treatment, or it's not that deep, just suck it up. But we literally go through things, and we should be allowed to speak about how we feel, and we should feel comfortable about that. I shouldn't have to hold back the way I feel to keep someone happy. If I feel uncomfortable about something, I shouldn't be worrying about, oh, I have to, you know, come across as this type of way so I don't offend anyone, because it's not like I'm coming with anything that's too dramatic. I just want to be treated fairly. I should be able to speak up and not feel like I'm being aggressive or being the aggressor. Although I didn't experience direct racism being part of UEA, I just feel like it's very important that clubs do more to involve people of colour and provide opportunities for them specifically to join clubs. This can be done through promoting diversity and making sure they have tasting days, but specifically for people of colour. So just to ensure that they feel comfortable first, because if we don't see people like us, we're not going to want to join these clubs. And I remember one thing that always stuck with me. So I don't row, I'm a cock. So basically, for those who don't know what cox is, I sit at the front of the boat and I guide the boat. So the rowers can't see the boat, and I'm basically telling everyone where to go in the boat, basically. So I'm the eyes of the boat. I remember when I told someone who didn't know what it was, I explained to them what it was, and they were like, well, you're black, so you must be loud, so you'll be able to, direct it perfectly. And again, I didn't want to come across as dramatic. It wasn't someone who was part of the boat club, by the way, just to clarify. But yeah, I was just like, I just brushed it off. And it's thing that I realized that a lot of black people do, we just brush things off because, again, we don't want to be seen as the aggressor. So we just sit there and just nod our heads and just, act like everything's okay. Because if we complain about something, not even complain, if we say anything, we're labeled as, trying to get special treatment when we ask for the bare minimum, bare respect. So I just think it's very important that we provide a safe space for people of color to actually have opportunities to join these clubs, because if you don't see people like yourself, you're never going to want to join these clubs. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. If anyone watching wants to collaborate with ACS in any sports events, you can just message me after the Zoom call. I think my username will be there somewhere, and we can figure something out. I'm not sure who I'm handing over to next, but I think the next week. So yeah.
You're handing over to me, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So hello, I'm Safia, but I'm not speaking on my own experience. I'm speaking for Christian, who's on the second football team, men's football. So I'm going to be reading out his experience. So it starts with, when I was asked to talk about this issue, I was not sure what to say. My experience at university, I'm glad to say, has not been plagued by racist experiences. I categorize my racist experiences as either overt or covert, blatant or subtle. The one recallable example of overt racism that I've experienced was perpetrated by a close friend. He would periodically use the N-word to irritate me in my first year. I would let him know that this made me uncomfortable, and then one day he just ceased its conduct. I'm unsure if it was my reactions and I'm unsure if my reactions and his stoppings were related, and I forgot all about it. But with the rising prevalence of the Black Lives Matter movement during lockdown, I thought back of this experience and I could not let bygones be bygones. I messaged him, still a very close friend, and we discussed his former behavior. He apologized profusely and began educating himself on the struggles that Black people endure chronically. I'm glad that he felt guilt, and I'm glad that he felt embarrassed. I hope this just goes to show that regardless of how dated racist encounters may be, they should still be addressed and discussed. I do not know how to categorize what I write next, but it's predicted on a great extent to be about race. In my third year, a fellow student came up to me and said, isn't it weird that we're the only Black guys left on this course? I never really paid much attention to it, and I'd never really dwelled on what he had said very much. I feel as though I should have. I feel as though I ought to have spoken out about racial issues more so, especially those surrounding representation. These issues led to an underrepresentation of BAME students at university, and by no means few. However, it is within all our power to discuss these issues and mitigate their effects. So our peers can feel more comfortable and they can feel like they're not at a disadvantage. The mass is greater than the individual. I regret not joining ACS. We all need a space where we can talk about the issues that pertain to our race. And I cannot thank Grace enough for providing this space for us all to speak out. To be silent is to internalize, normalize, and accept. Everyone should speak out. So that's Chris's statement on what he's been through. And I thought I'd add my own little piece at the end. And I wanted to say that even though this isn't my experience, I'd like to comment on the fact that racism in non-professional sports is often ignored and brushed aside by administration and peers because the perpetrators mask their racist comments as jokes or forms of humor. But racism isn't funny. A racist joke is still racist, even though it's a joke, because you can acknowledge the fact that it's a racist joke. And they should be treated as racist incidents. Gaslighting victims, like Muriel has said, by calling their reactions over the top, is not the way racist incidents within sports should be treated. Just because it's locker room talk or banter doesn't mean it affects the victim of this verbal assault any less, because these are things that you dwell on, things you remember, such as Christians. This is something that happened in his first year, and it's still something that he remembers and he thinks about daily, because these experiences affect people so deeply. Even though this person was joking, these are things that people think about constantly, and affects the way they interact with people, and it affects the way that they think people will interact with them in the future. There's a sense of anxiousness that pertains to Black people in white spaces because of jokes or things that people think are funny to make them uncomfortable, and will do so purposely because they think it's funny to watch you squirm as they make fun of the skin color you were born with, the color of your parents, your grandparents, your family. But that's not funny. I personally don't see how anything like that could ever be funny, because it's not like making fun of the fact that somebody wears glasses. They can always get contact lenses. I can always take these off, but I can't take off the color of my skin because you think that it's funny that I may swim and I'm Black, but Black people don't know how to swim. I mean, I don't know how to swim, but that's beside the point. It's true though. Those aren't things that people should ignore when they're brought to light, because Black people shouldn't be scared to say that this joke hurt them deeply, or people of color in general, because just because you think it's funny doesn't mean that it is. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That was really good. Now we're moving on to Chris. Yep.
Yeah, another Chris here. Hi guys. I'm Chris, member in Social Sec at UEA Rugby. Thank you all for coming along. I'd like to start by saying that overall I've had a pretty positive experience at the club and at UEA in general. The guys at the club, despite my preconceptions I had about University Rugby, were incredibly welcoming. I've since made many great friends in my first year. I'm proud to say that we have a real variety of people from different backgrounds playing across all teams already, and I'm even prouder to be one of these people. That being said, the rugby environment is predominantly white. I can understand why people of colour might be deterred from joining because of that. Being the only person of colour at previous rugby clubs is something that I could definitely relate. This is why it's so important that this year we have elected Tendai as a first equality and diversity officer, who will be speaking later on. I'll be working with Tendai to ensure that our socials continue to be as inclusive as possible and free from any discrimination. By providing an environment that is welcoming to all, we are to encourage more people of colour to join. I think a people of colour to join in sport would be to host a greater number of taster sessions a year. These taster sessions also don't have to be just about the sport. We all know that a big part of our sports clubs are the socials that come with them. So I think it would also be worth inviting potential new members to these so that they can see the welcoming environment for themselves. This is something that can be applied to all of our clubs. The final suggestion I'd like to make is for the university to make stronger sporting links to local schools to encourage sport for all at a young age. This might include inviting local schools to training sessions at the sports park, or sending some of our athletes to make speeches at these schools. So, this is incredibly important, especially people Spain. All done. I think Tendai's next.
Oh yeah, sorry mate, the connection was a bit funny.
No worries.
But yeah, here we go. Afternoon guys. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Tendai and I am a Quality and Diversity Officer for UEA Rugby and Social Secretary for UEA Judo this upcoming academic year. And I felt, as a person of colour, with what is going on in the contemporary world, I thought it would be an amazing opportunity to speak on my experiences here in the UK, both in sport and outside of sport as a black man. I grew up in a suburb of East London, but I lived in what many of you would call an anomaly within London, where it was very white dominated, where we're talking 2% of the population is black. So you can kind of have a picture of the type of environment I grew up in. Very white schools, very white culture, and a predominantly white social circle. And I'm not saying that there was anything wrong with having pieces of that within my life, but with most of my cultural identity coming from home, I felt I had to condition myself very differently in order to assimilate at school and in the public eye and within the sports that I did. This unfortunately did make me very naive and almost forced me to purge out any discriminatory treatment and comments made with regards to my race and culture. I have memories of racial slurs being used against me, even as recently as 3 weeks ago, where a woman I walked past whilst I was on one of my runs in my local town uttered the words fucking nigger to me. Racist jokes about slavery and immigrants being dismissed as merely banter at both matches and on coach journeys. Comments such as whether I have a knife in my possession, whether I know any drug dealers or whether I am one, people even keeping close grip of their purses or wallets when I walk past them in public and on public transport, etc. This did leave me in a state of dysphoria for many years, with me hating my race, questioning whether I was truly a welcome member of society or even welcomed on my sports teams. I often did not speak out against it because I knew I would have no one in my corner in those circumstances, because I know deep down a lot of them did agree with those opinions and the policies they supported, the figures they looked up to, and the beliefs of some of their family members who I knew very well due to being with them at sports events, coach journeys, and whatever. I would say a big turning point for me to kind of stop ignoring it was when I joined sixth form, where around 15 of us were classed as members of the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic demographic out of 170 of us. I was the only black boy that played rugby in my year. The views of the people who I consider very good mates, both past and present at the time within the rugby teams, both at my club and at my sixth form, became abundantly clear with me being introduced to the narrative that people of colour are now equals in society in the United Kingdom, and we do not know what we want anymore, essentially telling us to put up and shut up almost. This pushed me to make myself more informed on my history and the treatment of black people in the past 100 years. And I guess it made me prouder to be a black man, knowing the historical context I wouldn't have learned in school. So I really started to own my identity. Some examples include learning about concentration camps in Kenya, those black people fought in the world wars, the Bristol boycott of 1963, black philosophers, the whitewashing of many key historical figures. That's a long story for itself. And some great rugby and judo players such as Teddy Riner, Christian Wade, and Mauro Itoje. Unfortunately, that did not stop the discrimination I went through, and noticing the discrimination of friends of mine went through because of their race or religion. We cannot be naive and think that because we are in the United Kingdom, that racism is not a problem. It is very alive and real. To think only 100 years ago, people like me were zoo attractions here in the UK. We have seen in the past few years events such as the handling of the cases of Billy Magina, probably I pronounced that very, very wrong, and Shukuri Abdi, the Windrush generation, suffering from a toxic target-driven regime within the Home Office, the Met carrying out 22,000 searches on young black men between March and May, with 80% of these leading to no further action. And lest we forget the Grenfell disaster, we see we've all got a long way to go. Ways I think we can change are people of colour kind of banding together to go against injustice and discrimination within the education system, to help schools make more of a stand against it rather than giving these empty promises. Because I know from personal experience where if I was to make a claim about racism, a lot of my heads of year, etc., would kind of have these claims of, oh, there's not really much we can do about it, etc., when they're always propagating this narrative of bullying. From a sporting standpoint, I would love the RFU to do a full inquiry into the treatment of people of colour, especially at grassroots level, because I do believe it is a big problem. sporting clubs could also explicitly start to make club-wide pledges against discrimination, with sanctions being thoroughly carried out if not adhered to. I also do believe we need to challenge some of the narratives of our Black brothers and sisters in Africa, because unfortunately, many of them do believe, from my personal experiences, that that they do not need to actively speak out against racism and discrimination, essentially propagating this narrative that they are not being oppressed, so they do not need to make a stand on this at all. From what I've seen at UEA, the university is actively doing what they can to stamp out any forms of discrimination or harassment, and we do see that. Many of us do, through the campaigns they run, the work we do with various societies and universities such as the ACS. And I believe the university needs to carry on actively working with these groups, because who better to hear from than those who are being actively oppressed? But we also do need to create an open dialogue with those who hold these offensive views against us, and have these open, uncomfortable conversations to gain a grasp as to why they hold these views and what we can do to actively attack this mentality. Finally, God, I would like to say that this is not an easy road to equality, especially within sport, especially in sports like mine, for example, with rugby and judo. It has never been, but I do believe that one day we will achieve this equality. Thank you for everyone that's given their time to listen, and thank you to those who have shared prior and those who are about to share as well. And a huge thank you to UEA Cheer. Thank you, girls, for hosting this panel. This is really the start of something great. That's me done.
I think it's me next, isn't it? Right, hi, my name's Sweep. I'm a first year going into second year doing business management. As you guys can probably tell, I'm brown, so I've probably experienced racism in my life. Definitely have. I want to just sort of touch upon two parts. First part being the fact, I want to talk about my experience strictly with sports in UEA. I kind of was on behalf of UEA Cricket Club, but I'm part of like other sports club as well, fencing, ultimate frisbee, that sort of thing. But I want to talk about my personal experience with the sports club, specifically at UEA. And the second half that I want to talk about is not strictly to do with racism, but it includes things like discrimination and inclusion to do with that sort of thing. So in terms of the first half, racism and lack of inclusion in the past, but my experience with UEA Cricket Club, for instance, so far has been very positive, if I'm being honest, because going into it, there's this whole drinking culture in the university, right? And being a Muslim, I don't drink, and I was sort of thinking that at some point someone was going to try and pressurize me in some way, shape, or form to go into parties and sixth forms and all that sort of thing. And people always not necessarily pressurize you, but still have questions, which is fine, which is absolutely fine. I don't mind answering questions or educating people about that sort of thing. But you do get those one or two, people that will try and pressurize you. And in the cricket club, I was kind of most expecting it to happen because it's very sort of lad culture, very sort of dominated. If you've been to rugby prees, if you've seen cricket prees or socials, they get hella crazy and hectic, which they do. Yes, so they get hella crazy and hectic, and there's a lot of drinking involved. There's a lot of singing, dancing, all that sort of thing involved. So I thought people would try and force me into that. But the best thing that I loved was the fact that even though I've experienced this in the past, when I said, "Oh yeah, I don't drink," no one batted an eyelid. No one asked me any questions about it. No one told me, "Oh yeah, why don't you drink?" or try to force me into it. In fact, I was still included into the act, and if people are having like a race of who can down a pint the quickest, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, you can have lemonade," and still take part in the race, and that sort of thing. So in terms of inclusion and race, I personally, from UEA, like joining sports clubs, even like frisbee or all that sort of thing, I haven't had issues in terms of race in specific sports clubs. But I know racism still exists at UEA, and I've experienced that to some degree. In terms of my second point, I want to talk about some general, but more to do with like financial inclusion, because as we know, to join a sports club, it can be very, very expensive at UEA. And I will link this back into sort of ethnicity and racism a little bit at the end. Hopefully it makes a bit more sense, but it's just to join, you know, you have to pay £55, Sam, £50 for a career club membership. On top of that, you kind of have to buy like £30 kit, which equates to about £135. Some clubs are a little bit, for football, for instance, it's 80 quid. So it can get very expensive just to join one club, and someone that wants to join multiple clubs can't do that. So for an international student that comes from India, that comes from, you know, China, that comes from Malaysia, they're not all rich, just because I know some of them you see around, you know, wearing nice bags or whatever, but most of them aren't actually rich. Like some of my friends from India, their parents have mortgaged their houses for them to be there, right? And they might not be able to have access to those sports clubs just because of the prices and how expensive they are. And that's what's called disclusion. That's what's called not being able to be included. That's what's called privilege that other people have over other people. Whether that's because of your race, whether that's because of your financial background, that sort of underprivileged sort of scenario does still exist at UEA. And if you take, and you might be thinking, oh, well, it's the budget or whatever. I don't think that's the case, because universities like Bradford, New Berks University, Bradford University, for £150 for a year, you can join all of their sports clubs. They're like 40 sports clubs. You can join all of their sports clubs plus the gym for the year. You can join any sports club and go to them at any time. New Berks University, there's no fees, there's no SAM, there's no membership. It's all free. So all these international students from different ethnic backgrounds, different financial situations are coming over, and they're able to join these lower ranked universities. If they can find the budget, I'm sure these that are getting more funding, more likely because they have a lot more students applying to them, can find the funding as well to sort of include more people and not have that financial burden for starters, and have different people from different ethnic backgrounds involved. And that's what I think privilege is about. That's what I think, you know, not necessarily ties in perfectly with racism, but I'm pretty sure like you can talk about inclusion with it. So my experience with specifically UEA sports in terms of racism, to round up, has been very positive. But so far, I think UEA can do more when it comes to being able to include everyone from ethnic backgrounds, everyone from different financial backgrounds into sports and societies and clubs. Because if other universities can do it, so can UEA. All right. So that's pretty much me done. Thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it.
Okay, I think it's me next. I'm speaking on behalf of a rugby member. So I'm just going to read out what they've written. I've been a part of the club since my first year, and I'm going into third year. I am one of 2 people in the club of South Asian heritage. In a way, we have been treated with quite a bit of disrespect from our peers. Throughout all this time, paying £155 membership and attending most training sessions to improve my game, I've only played 5 minutes of Saturday League rugby. I've gotten the clear impression over the years that my teammates and captains do not want me in the game, from giving unclear answers as to why I'm not played, to being given bad passes and being moved to a less used position than the one I'm supposed to be playing. This feels like it goes against the club's ethos of showing improvement and getting more games. When it comes to socials, I've been told to stop what I'm doing because it was disruptive, whereas someone else doing the same would be commended for their behaviour. All I know is that anyone else who was white did anything that I did, it would be perceived as funny or entertaining. I'm regularly spoken down to, including by freshers, as they know my place within the club is. At joint socials, other boys have told me that girls don't want to be seen with brown guys, and people like you aren't really good looking. It feels like other members of rugby go out of their way to stop me from socialising with other sports club members, and have been interrupted on occasions where I've been talking to them for the reasons of they don't like people like you and comments along those lines. On more than one occasion, I've ended up leaving socials to avoid starting an argument and ruining the atmosphere for everyone else. When running for a position on the committee, I got the feedback, someone like you can't represent our club, you don't look like someone that plays rugby, and had very few members actually view my speech. The racism and abuse I've experienced in UEA rugby is not as direct as others who have experienced it. Instead, it is more subtle with the things I've already said. I know many others would not stand for this if they were in my position, but there really is not much you can do by yourself when everyone will automatically say otherwise and be against you for it. That's what they've got to say. But thank you. I just want to thank everyone who has volunteered to speak on this call. I'm going to pass over to Aaron now, who's screen sharing already. So that's great.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Lovely. Hello. First of all, apologies. My webcam's actually broken, so you won't get to see my wonderful face, but I do have a presentation for you all. So I want to talk a little bit about creating an anti-racist culture within sports teams and how it works within sports teams, but how it ultimately affects the university. So I click. So a little bit about myself, first of all, my experience. So I'm going into 4th year. I am a basketball player, and I'm also an activist. I'm part of the team who created the Eradicate Hate Scheme throughout the university. I have been, I would say, reasonably lucky with my university experience. I've only had a few altercations, including being called the N-word at a sports night. There was also an altercation with another team where there was racial abuse hurled at me. But apart from that, it's been pretty good. I think the worst ever experience I did have, though, was actually in college, where I was playing basketball, and our team we moved about quite a lot. So we traveled to Manchester to play this prep school. And it was majority white. I think it was basically most of the team was white and 2 Asian guys. And the audience there were very uncooperative. They were making monkey noises. We were called racial slurs during the whole game. And it was just a very uncomfortable environment to play in. But as I said, that's probably the worst experience I've had in terms of racism within sport. But as I said, my time at university has actually been fairly good. So I just want to quickly cover that racism can take many forms. Everybody's been speaking about this so much already. But obviously you can have overt racial discrimination. This could be using racial slurs or excluding somebody because of their race specifically. But obviously, as some of the others people have explained, it could be microaggressions, i.e. you're slow for a black guy, or I thought black people couldn't swim. There's also other forms, including things like racial biases. And I would encourage you all to just have a little look into some of the forms of racism yourself, because you may not even realize that actually you're enabling some of this behavior. So where and how can racism occur in sport? Well, the simple answer to where is pretty much it can happen anywhere. But to give a few examples of the places where it might most commonly be found, it can be in training. So this could be between teammates, this could be between teammates and coaches, this could even be between coaches, to be honest with you. Matches and events are some of the most common occurrences, because obviously in a heated environment, or if it's a big game and everybody's in it and the fans and everybody wants to win, obviously people do say things in the heat of the moment, and even still, that's not me condoning what they're saying. It shouldn't be said anyway, but obviously we do recognize the environment that they're in. Also, team socials, obviously you have things like games nights, club nights, drinking socials, things like that, where unfortunately racial incidents can take place. As for the how, again, there are so many different ways. Few examples. A fan using a racial slur to throw off a member of team. I've seen this firsthand before. Coaches singling out members of team because of their race. I haven't seen this, but I've heard of it before. Someone dressing up in blackface for a social event. This actually occurred at the university many, many years before even I was here, but it's something I have read about before. Okay, so what can we do? So a lot of you may have heard the term anti-racist being used recently. You might even be a bit confused about what it is, or even if you do, you might not know how to relate it to sport. So I think the very first thing you need to do is understand what anti-racist is. So firstly, non-racist and anti-racist are not the same. And in brackets, you can see I've put passive and active. Non-racist or non-racism is the idea that you understand that everybody should be treated equally in regards to race. No one race is above another. However, why it said passive here is because you're not actually acting on that. So even though you believe it, you're not doing things to help create this level playing field, this equality. Anti-racism is active. It's saying, okay, all races need to be treated the same. How are we going to achieve this? So a little thing here, it says anti-racism is the active process of identifying and eliminating racism by changing systems, organizational structures, policies, practices, and attitudes so that power is redistributed and shared equitably. So that's quite a lot of words, but basically what it means is breaking down those things that are stopping everybody from being equal. Specifically right here, we're looking at practices, attitudes, and organizational structures. So how many people, of color specifically are within, this given sport, and how many of them are achieving high positions within the committee, etc. How am I treating my fellow teammates? How am I engaging with them? There is more resources. This presentation will be available for everybody, and there are some resources at the end of the presentation with some links for you guys. So I'm a bit cheesy here. I decided to come up with a little bit of an acronym. So it's called Being Anti-Racist in Sport, or SPORT. So speaking up, preventing potential problems, openly supporting, recognition, taking accountability, as well as holding others accountable. So speaking up, this is simple yet effective, and it's exactly what you see. Basically, when you hear someone being racist, discriminatory, displaying a form of microaggressions, you speak up and you call them out every single time. So if you notice that one of your teammates is playing with somebody's hair when they've not allowed them to, you say, why are you doing that? Or if somebody uses racial slur, you call them out on it. You say, that's not right. You shouldn't be saying things like that. It's important. So when calling people out, it's important to challenge them on why they said that, or why they thought that thing was appropriate. So as I said there, asking them why they thought it was appropriate to use that slur, because sometimes the way people have been raised, they don't actually they may not realize that particular word that they're using is a slur, simply because of the environment they've been raised around. The most important thing about speaking up is you should always be speaking up, even when people aren't around or don't speak up for themselves. For instance, just because there are no Asian people in a room doesn't mean you can start using language that Asians may find offensive. And if you do notice somebody using it, you should call them out. And furthermore, especially in the case of microaggressions, people may not feel that they want to speak up about it because they don't want to make a big deal, or especially in the case of Black people, I know specifically, we don't want to be deemed as aggressive for confronting people. So it's really good to just say, hey, I'm supporting this person by calling this action out. Preventing potential problems. This is all about thinking ahead, considering how your actions could be perceived, and just how your actions and what problems they could create. Think of it as like a racism risk assessment. Whenever we as clubs do any events, we have to fill out a risk assessment form. And it's like, okay, how can people be physically injured? I'm saying what you need to consider is how can people be, mentally injured, if that makes sense, like sensitivity and things like that. So each individual sport has its own set of unique problems and issues that relate to racism. And an example could be bias judging reffing. Now, I'm not going to make the claim that I have experienced it, but I feel sometimes there has been unfair reffing in certain occasions where I've got technical fouls or things like this because I've been deemed as aggressive in my behavior when my behavior was not actually aggressive. And it is the job of everybody in the club. So this goes beyond just committee members. This goes beyond just people who are actively part of the team, but anybody who signs up to your club, it's their job to identify, highlight potential problems and solutions. Openly supporting is pretty much what it says. So all of us as individuals and all of us as societies, sports clubs, we have a presence of social media. Openly supporting involves raising awareness, sharing resources, and generally making it known you're in support of change. Now, it doesn't have to mean that your page now needs to become the activist, an activism page. What it means is just every now and then at least highlighting some key points. So a good example here is stories or highlights tabs. They're really good ways of putting up things for a temporary amount of time just to get some information out there. The links to external resources. So a lot of you have Instagram bios and the links there. Like sometimes some people don't use them. You can put a little bit of information there. But supporting also occurs outside of social media. This means attending events such as this. So, small round of applause for yourself for attending this event because it's a good chance to learn. And it's also club standing in solidarity. So things like moments of silence, fundraisers, and things like that. Recognition. Recognition can take many forms, okay? So the one I want to speak about is recognize the shortfall of BAME or POC. It is a useful term in some situations, like right now where we are talking about as a group of collective. However, what we need to realize is that different races have different issues And these different issues will affect people differently within their sport, within their given sports. And so sometimes using BAME or POC is not the best option. And actually, it's very important to highlight specific issues. So, for instance, Black History Month, I would not be talking about BAME people in Black History Month. I would be focusing specifically on Black people, which I did with the Once a Panther video. But yes, so recognizing when race is a factor in a given situation, this may be a hard thing for some people to realize, but in a lot of situations, race will play a part, especially when you're in a sporting environment. As I said, it may be on how you're being perceived. It may be on how the other teammates treat you or opponents treat you. So in terms of your clubs as well, it's recognizing where they failed before, acknowledging it, and actively working to be better. So obviously, all clubs probably have at least one story, you know, maybe it's not well known, but of a racial incident or, you know, a thing where they could have done better. And basically, it's our job to say, okay, we're not just going to brush this under the table. We're going to acknowledge, hey, this event happened. There was a problem here. Now, how are we going to work actively to being better? It's recognizing your own shortcomings, and it's recognizing when and how you have privilege. And as I said, again, people of color may be perceived as more threatening. So especially for the white people in this chat, like in certain spaces, you will have privilege, and this occurs in sport as well, where everybody is supposed to be equal, but unfortunately, that's not always the case. And finally, recognition leads into taking accountability, which is probably the most important thing in this list. As accountability basically means that we are changing, and that change is going to be permanent. If we lose accountability, you will find that very quickly things go back to the way they used to be. Taking accountability basically encompasses everything I've said. It's recognizing where you've previously been enabling racism, learning from these issues and helping to prevent similar issues from occurring, openly supporting and speaking up when someone else does wrong in order to help the culture, to change the culture as a whole. Now, understand it is both equally important for you to take accountability for yourself as well as holding others accountable. Because obviously, when we're in an environment like this, like obviously, you can look very much easier into yourself and say, hey, I'm doing this, but as I said, speaking up is such a key thing, and that's it. And speaking up is a way of holding people accountable, saying, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. That's not it, however. What I've described in this overly long thing was a vast oversimplification of how to tackle systemic racism and be actively anti-racism. And there is simply not enough time. I could sit here for 3 hours and not even, scratch the surface. My aim today was just to give you guys some simple actions that you can begin applying for everyday life. And I just want to challenge you guys as well to think about, how you as an individual and how your clubs can be part of that change and be different. And understand this will require effort from everybody. This means that you will have to do your research. You'll have to learn to listen to others and, listen to their experiences, which is good, that you're all here today because you're showing that your ability to listen. It's empowering. It's for those people who are in positions of privilege to empower the voices of those who aren't. Again, like today, where it's, one club has decided to give a voice to many different people. So lastly, sport is a big part of our university. Many, if most, not all of our students will try a sport at one point in time. Many students will join a club for at least a year and take part in games and events. Basically, every student knows someone who does a sport. So imagine now, if the majority of people playing sports and the clubs themselves were actively anti-racist, think about the impact that could have on the university as a whole. I can't remember who said it, but we're talking about the changing culture in the university. And I've been working very hard to ensure that we're making, real change and that change lasts. And imagine now if the whole of UEA sport and the entire clubs was on that wavelength as well. And imagine the difference that could actually make. That's a large part of the university. And that's it. Thank you very much. There is some further links here, but as I said, you will have the presentation available if you would like it.
Okay, well, that is all of our speakers. Thank you so much to all of our speakers that did speak, because it is scary sometimes speaking about these experiences, and we understand that, and we thank you so much for sharing them. I think Aaron has led us perfectly on to open up the discussion to any other comments about anyone else's experiences or any questions that you might have about anything that's been said here, questions about anything that we can do more, stuff like that. So, and I know that Grace wants to speak about our club and what we're doing, and hopefully that can translate into what
yeah, so just basically kind of letting everyone know what we as a club are doing, in case anyone wanted to collaborate or kind of follow the same lines. So we've been looking at codes of conduct within the sports clubs, and a lot of the actual internal codes of conduct are very basic. but we think that's somewhere we can really make a big difference from a small action. So we're introducing a lot of points in our code of conduct, including like addressing microaggressions and how complaints of racial incidents will be handled internally, as well as if then that gets taken to UEA Sport, what we as a committee and as a club can do about it. We also want to continue doing these sorts of events and collaborating with ACS and other societies to really give a safe place for our members to speak about their own experiences and feel comfortable and happy doing that. Because, you know, for a lot of our members, we're a big support system for them. So I think it's just an important thing for everyone to, like, especially over summer, we can really take this time to start enacting real changes within our clubs, and hopefully that will translate to the wider community at university. That's it. That's what I've got.
Thank you, Grace. I haven't had any other messages. Has anyone got any other comments or questions to add? If not, that's fine. But
yeah, literally anything is welcome at all.
Oh, sorry, Joe here, UEA Sport. I was going to ask, is this, sorry, who should ask at the start, has this been recorded, this session, by any chance? Do you know?
Yeah, so it's being recorded. I think we'll probably post it to our page. I'm guessing ACS will also post it to theirs. And then Aaron's presentation will also be available.
Yeah, it might be worth, we can have a chat, we can get it out to, I found it really useful, really interesting, out to the other clubs as well.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I was thinking actually while Aaron was giving his presentation, that could be a really useful thing to put in for when we have our initial training for committee. Maybe that could be a part of that in future.
Yeah, that'd be good, I think.
I
think we also, I don't know if many of you guys have heard of the Bucks Take a Stand campaign, which has 8 different strands, but it does have racism as well. But I suppose it's something for all clubs to think about, is how to actually, it's all very well having that sort of branding, but actually doing stuff like this is more tangible, I think, which is really good. So it's actually thinking about more, rather than just clubs saying, oh yeah, we support Take a Stand and sign a charter, but what are they actually doing? So this is a really good example of putting that into action. So well done.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly say two quick things. First of all, in terms of basketball, we had some plans this year. It kind of fell apart because of everything that happened, unfortunately. But I am talking to the current committee, because I was on the committee last year. I'm talking to the current committee still. So hopefully we'll be incorporating some things, including fundraisers and just acknowledging things like moments of silence. And I think these are good. These are like little things that you can involve in your sporting events as and when they do return. Obviously, we understand COVID, but as and when they do return, these are like the little things that you can do just to show that you're taking a stand, I guess. The only other thing I did want to mention as well is, as I did say about this is the anti-racism scheme at UE that we currently have at UEA. So it was founded by this wonderful woman along with myself and 3 others. So if anybody here has been a victim of racism or knows somebody that has been a victim, so you don't actually have to be the victim to report it in this scheme. We have an anonymous system, so you can either report anonymously, you can use your name, or if you know somebody who's been a victim of racism, you've seen it, say for instance on a night out, for instance, you can also report on behalf of that person. So just a little bit of information for you guys there, but you can find it on the UEA website anyway under Eradicate Hate.
Sorry, one more thing to add, sorry, and might put this out to the rest of the UEA Sport team as well, what they think. It might be worth trying to almost, so it's a sort of a collaborative effort, because obviously there's lots of pockets of great stuff happening, but it might be worth us having a bit of a chat as a team about almost putting together a bit of a working group with those that are keen from this group to be involved, and sort of doing collaborative campaigns as well, so we can try and sort of get a big movement behind different, obviously Aaron talks about all the moments, minutes of silences and things like that. It might be good if we can maybe speak with some of you afterwards. I don't know what if the rest of the team have any thoughts on that. I don't want to just sort of jump in out of turn. Sophie or James, don't know.
Sorry, James, I'm jumping in on you. More than happy to kind of discuss where we head with it. I think there's a really good opportunity to approach things in a slightly different way. But obviously, there's also a huge number of existing factors to consider. I know we've had a lot of very different kind of opportunities, I guess, from the speakers today, which is absolutely fantastic to hear. And it will be interesting to see where we can take things and the movement that you as students can ignite. But it would be, yeah, so it'd be interesting to get a group together to talk a little bit further about it and see what's possible. Sorry, James, I'll let you speak now.
Yeah, I've got nothing more to add on that than if you can hear me.
You've just popped yourself back on mute.
Here we go. Yeah, it was a really interesting session. Thank you all for your contributions. I mean, some of them must have been extremely difficult to tell as well, so appreciate that. And yeah, like everyone said, Joe and Sophie, just to reiterate that, we're obviously taking these issues as seriously as we can, and we will be picking up some conversations internally and then working with you as a group to see how we can put more things into practice and be more anti-racist, as been said. So yeah, thank you all for contributing, and we'll be in touch.
I have received another question. It's quite an open question to both UEA sports staff or students, just anyone that has any suggestions. This person would just love to hear what people think, like what can actually be done in terms of financial accessibility that was discussed earlier, like the high costing. What is there anything that we can do as students, as the clubs, as UEA sport staff that can tackle this, because it is a problem for quite a lot of students?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond. Sorry, Sophie, just put in on you now. I think in any other time we'd be much further along with our budgeting process and be able to think about this sort of thing. And accessibility is definitely something we've thought about before when setting budgets. We're reliant a lot on the university itself and how they fund sport, and it was interesting to hear some of the comments earlier about other institutions being completely free. And yeah, it's something that is on our radar, but we are not able to suddenly make those sweeping changes. It's a really interesting conversation to take forward, and I think something we'll look at. But as I said at the start of this answer, because of coronavirus and where the university is with budgets and where every department of the university is with that sort of thing, we currently can't answer that question with any detail because everything's up in the air. The next financial year is meant to start in a couple of weeks' time, and we're having to resend all of our budgets in, and it's all completely unknown at the moment. But when they are set, I think it's definitely part of the conversation in these tangible actions we can take forward is accessibility and costs. Prohibitive, and we'll need to the university like widening participation teams that have grants and things for different groups of people. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility. And yeah, sorry, I can't be any more sort of succinct with my answer than that, but it's just something that we can continue to look at.
I know that this is also on Lizzie Payne's agenda as the incoming activities and opportunities officer. So bringing her in on this conversation as well would be really important in order to try and support the initiative around it. As James rightly says, obviously everything this year is a little bit up in the air, so we'll have to react to that as we do. But I think bringing Lizzie into this conversation would be really, really beneficial, both for that opportunity, but also for the wider contextual elements of the discussions that have taken place today.
I'd just like to quickly weigh in because I know I brought up that side of things. So I have thought about this in terms of, I know it might not be something that you're able to immediately take action on, but in terms of solutions, I think, first of all, starting with a sports park, you can obviously easily change the membership of paying £150 or £300, you paying a monthly membership, because that's just too strenuous. And it's ridiculous that you don't have monthly memberships when pretty much every gym around the world and around the country does that sort of thing. And you're not able to get access to the machines as much as possible as well, because the gym's jam-packed. In terms of sports clubs, definitely like Sam, what is that? Get rid of that, please. Or creating some sort of bundle where you can access multiple clubs at the same time, and you can get some form of a discount. So that might be another solution to sort of mitigate and sort of like buy one get one free type of thing you could do. Or you could do like what Bradford does, where you can have like a £150 sort of for the year bundle in accessing every single sports club. I know the only downside to that I see is the fact that people that are actually playing on a competitive level, because obviously some people want to take this a bit more seriously and be like have a community, but if people are constantly jumping in and out of the sports club, that can be a bit annoying for the sports club's management and the students to keep up with, because some people might just turn up to sort of muck about and not really take part properly, and that can be quite annoying. So if it's like too accessible in that way, that can have that sort of still making it somewhat more financially accessible, like getting rid of SAM or creating like a monthly sort of where you pay a little bit as you go, would be a lot less strenuous on the students, I think. So those are a couple of solutions that I thought of earlier about that topic.
Just want to jump in on that. There's a really great infographic on our website which actually tells you what that SAM contributes towards, and basically we can't operate without SAM. SAM contributes to our overall budget. It contributes to the delivery of all of the different sports, and I'm happy to put the link in the chat to the infographic on that. In addition, it's really important to realise that we run at a huge deficit. So the university underwrites our department by a very large six-figure sum each year. So the money that we do get from students participating in sport, either through SAM or through their student affiliations and your club costs, is very minimal in comparison to our actual overall expenditure. And the university underwrites that quite significantly to provide the opportunities that we can for you. Where some of the universities you mentioned earlier, I had a quick look at the websites while you were talking, and it's perceptively seen that there's a lot of external funding brought into those universities, and that's something that we are now looking at. So we have received £10,000 this year from an external sponsor, which we can now confirm, who are going to be contributing that money towards the participation programme delivery of the department this year. So we're trying to find innovative ways of bringing that additional funding through to support student activity and inclusivity and opportunity, but it's very, very much a work in progress. It's also worth pointing out that I appreciate you guys coming into university on a 3 or 4 yearly cycle. The department has actually only existed in its current format for the last 5 years, and has only recently grown in the last 18 months to actually be the size that it is. So we are still growing, we're still finding new opportunities for growth, and therefore what we can deliver back to you guys within the student body. But it's forums like this which are really important in pushing us and pushing the boundaries so that we can start to think about some of these areas. You mentioned about multi-sport bundles. Literally only on Tuesday, Joe and I were sat talking about this in our one-to-one, and having some ideas around that. So lots of the ideas are there. We just need to have a little bit of time and a little bit of opportunity to work through them to see what we can achieve. But forums like this are great for bringing those to the fore. So thank you for identifying them. And I hope that some of the bits I've said can help to alleviate some of the potential long-term issues. But please be confident that we are working towards trying to make things as accessible and opportunistic as possible.
Great. Can I just add one bit to that as well, so if you don't mind, around in regards to the gym membership and the overuse. Obviously, it's well acknowledged that the sports park facility is incredibly busy. Obviously, it's a joint facility with the community as well as students, and that's part of the funding model, how it runs. But there is the director has been looking at space, trying to find space on campus for almost like a student-only gym, because But as you know, I don't know if you know much about the teaching space, and actually the university teaching space is at a premium as it is anyway. So that's been on the agenda for about 3 years now. But all these things, it doesn't sound like much. It sounds like we don't want to sound like we're just fobbing you off with, oh, it's coming. But these things are seriously being looked into, because we have to agree. Obviously, it's really hard to get in the gym, and it's not ideal. Can see why people don't like having to pay the 150 and the 300 up front, because it is a huge sum to have to pay up front. So we sort of want you to know we're on your side from a UEA Sport Department to try and help with that as well. So don't just, when you think we're just sort of denying that there are issues there. If that's helpful, I don't know, but just so to keep you in the loop.
Yeah, no, that is really helpful. I feel like there's a lot of information about how UEA Sport works and budgets, and about like the Eradicate Hate campaigns and all sort of things like code of conducts and all that stuff. There is a lot on the UEA website. So like if you haven't looked through, kind of a lot of the information on the UEA website is where you can also spot where there are kind of spaces to be filled with actions from our point as club members.
Yeah, it might be good actually, Grace, to get a bit of a list, if we can start sort of like, as Sophie mentioned, picking up some of these conversations, because it is loads. It's like quite complicated. There's loads of information, so we can sort of start pinging stuff out to, or maybe a general mailing list, or picking up with individuals specifically, if people would find that useful.
Yeah, I've been writing like a list of stuff down whilst we've been going through.
Yeah.
So I've got a list of stuff here that's been mentioned, and that if conversations like need to be continued and stuff like that. So I'll email that over to someone. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like obviously this is an ongoing conversation, and I think it would be a good opportunity for everyone to kind of go away and think about what differences they can make on each level. Like for instance, we hadn't considered like going to schools and talking to students about sports and stuff. I think that's a really good suggestion.
It's interesting on that, Grace. We actually did that with rugby just last year, and it proved really beneficial. And we had about 8 interested candidates from one school that we visited, and that was in conjunction with James Spooner of the Men's Rugby Club. So, Chris, it would be interesting for you to have a touch point with him, to discuss how that works and how we might evolve that over time. But you are right, Grace, across other sports as well would be really crucial.
Yeah, I think that's a really good take.
Okay, well, does anyone have any more comments or questions?
I'll just say
thank you. It's brilliant. Don't want to sort of get away from all the original content and really important stuff we were talking about in the first place. It's really good, and definitely loads of work to be done.
Thank you. Aaron.
That's fine. Yeah, I will just say, to the community point, I think it's really important that, schools, but the community in general, because a lot of us who play sports play in also the local leagues and things like that, and there has been issues before, as some of you will be aware of. But yeah, there has been issues before. One also, last quick thing I do want to know is that if anybody is interested, I'm currently in the midst of doing an open letter to the university about racial experiences. So if anybody in this call would like to be a part of that, please reach out to me and I'll give you more information.
Yeah, if anyone's looking to connect with other people from this call, you can look up my email or Deng's email. It'll come up on your UEA, or I'm sure you already have us as contacts. But we'd be really happy to connect everyone to whoever they want to kind of talk to about moving things forward.
just want to say, girls, again, I know Joe's already said it, but to reiterate, fantastic work on pulling this together. It's really great to hear different people's opinions and views, and hopefully this conversation will grow and help push us forward in an innovative and positive light. So thank you for that, and I look forward to hearing more from conversations in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, if we don't have any other comments or questions, then I just want to thank everyone who's spoken again. I know it was really intimidating, and just like thank you for taking time out of your day to do that and yeah, help us out with that. And thank you to everyone who's come along. It is being recorded, so I'll be posting that. But yeah, just thank you for coming, because it could have been disastrous.
We're also making we're going to make a post that summarizes everything that's been said, summarizes points that we can move forward on and stuff like that. So that will be going out, and I'll send that out to UEA Sport as well.
Yeah.
And I think that could be quite a good resource to share between the clubs and stuff, especially for people that weren't here. So yeah, that's it then.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing from some of you in future. Okay.
Bye. Thank you.
Should I end it? I'm gonna end it. Okay.
Yeah.